Hello, hello, hello. Today I'm talking with Susanne and Sylvia Taylor. We talked about growing up in Anchorage, Alaska, don't wanting to be known for one tool, and avoiding to become a doormat. I'm Yves Hanul from Who's Agile. My pronouns are he and him. Welcome to my channel. You see a lot of agilists around me on this screen. If you want to hear me interviewing, please click that subscribe button because these are the people that I've invited so far. If you think I'm missing people, let me know in the comments. And that like button, well, if you liked today's interview, don't forget to click it. Hello, hello everyone. And with me I have Susanne and Sylvia. Welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having us, Yves.
And having us is, let's also share. I'm trying to, that's the bad thing about changing stuff just before we started. And I have a trouble with finding my mouse. And here is where I am in Belgium, in Ghent. And I need to go back here and let me see where both of you. And Sylvia, you're in Berlin, if I'm correct. And so that we're seeing where you are with a couple of other people that I've interviewed already. And Susanne, you're in Munich, if I'm correct, or somewhere there. And of course, not the goal to show the exact location. We don't want to help stalkers or anything like that. And let's bring both of you on here. And well, why are you both here together? Let's start with that as an introduction. And maybe you can introduce each other. Maybe that's also a nice thing.
We love doing that. I'm not sure that we're prepared for it today, but try.
Okay, go
ahead.
ahead.
You asked two questions. Which one would you like first?
Your choice.
So I think the reason we're both here today is because we were nominated both at the same time from our lovely host from the Vilnius Ale, Agile Europe last year, Ornella. And we thought, the co-keynote was fun. Maybe a co-podcast would also be fun. Why don't we do it? So here we are.
What she said.
And so, well, Susanne, maybe you introduce Sylvia. What do you think people should know about her?
Oh my gosh, so many things. Sylvia is a lover of travel and delicious food. And she's really passionate about people working not just effectively together, but maybe joyfully together, and sharing decision-making and really including everybody in making and delivering value. I'll just put it that simply. And she has so many tools. The latest one I hope she brings up, I still don't understand it. I'm not even going to say what it is because I'm just planting the seed that she talks about it.
Oh, that's already fun. Okay.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you, Susanne. How would I introduce you? A Japanophile, if that makes sense. A lover of all things. Well, maybe I would almost say Asian, but really you have a love of Japan. And your long-awaited trip to go with your daughter is actually becoming a reality. And this is a child that's grown up with anime. So I know this is something that I think Susanne also brings a lot of those same values from the Asian culture, harmony and fairness. So equity, people coming together in community. And I think it's also really great for people to know that she got her master's in intercultural communication because she also has this love of travel. This was instilled in us as a family from our parents, but she was in love with the Asian culture. I went the other direction to Europe, and with having traveled and lived in Taiwan and Japan, I think the values of those cultures she brought to Europe with her, I think 15 years ago. So she's been in Munich for 15 years. And those are things, this compassion and deep listening, and holding the space. I think she was one of the first people who really explained that well to me from a coaching perspective. Like, what does that mean and why is that of value? And I think she really brings that wherever she is. And she's really good at just being present. So I'll lay that there. She's, yeah.
Wow, which lovely introductions. And there is actually a couple of people from Japan that I've already interviewed that people can find on the podcast. And there's at least one more that I've scheduled to do in a couple of months. So yeah, there are some things there to find. And well, both of you left out a rather obvious thing, but at the same time that I don't know if people know that both of you are sisters. That might be visible for people, but you left out that part.
We did. Yes, twin sisters.
Can you tell who's older?
Oh, I was just going to say 2 minutes apart. Let's not make them guess who's older. Becoming less relevant.
The older we get, the less relevant the minutes are.
It's going to become sooner like who's tallest, right? As we get older, you'll be like, well, I'm taller.
Okay, yeah, that's another thing. Well, that's always hard to see who's taller if we work in remote. So that's one of these things that everybody looks more or less the same, depending how close or how far we are to the camera. They might look us a little bit taller or closer or smaller, but yeah, exactly that. Okay, well, thanks for that lovely introduction. Let's jump into the questions. And like I said in the introduction before, I let both of you choose who wants to go first. So, but what's something that people usually don't know about you, but has influenced you in who you are?
Sylvia, do you want to go first?
Well, I'm wondering if we're going to say the same thing.
Yeah.
Because we didn't share our answers with each other.
No.
So I would say the first thing almost always that comes to mind for me is that I wasn't born, or we weren't born in Alaska, but we were raised in Alaska. And it's when everyone asks like, oh, where are you from? We say Anchorage, Alaska. We don't say the United States. I mean, maybe for simplicity purposes, I say American. But, uh-oh. What happened?
I'm still here.
Sorry. Everything just blanked out, and I don't know why. That was really strange. So sorry for that. Everything went black.
It's an important thing that I should have said in the introduction, but a couple of people have told me that if this Teams and Zoom don't black out, don't make sure that the screensaver don't comes on, and with this one that doesn't happen. So that might be a reason to.
Okay,
to do
so I will just kind of keep my mouse.
Yeah, exactly. Sorry, I should have said that in.
That's all right. I just panicked a little bit and went, "Oh, what did I do? What happened? Technology." So to wrap it up, I will say that sharing that I'm from Alaska, and that's where we grew up. The fact that it's a harsh climate, but a really open also and progressive one. I feel like we grew up in a place where there were so many different cultures. Anchorage is a town of 250,000 people, so it's not big, but it's very international. They have a Korean community, they have a big Vietnamese community, they have a German community, a French community,
Wow.
Austrian, Norwegian, like it was the hub for Japan Airlines and for Lufthansa. And so I think we grew up multicultural, but we grew up in Alaska and somewhat separated from the United States. So we also didn't I don't know. It influenced me in a way that is sometimes hard to articulate. Susanne would she'd do a better job of sharing what that means. But I absolutely believe that influenced me to be maybe pioneering, taking a risk, but being prepared so that risk maybe doesn't seem as risky, and creating community, because in Alaska, that's all you have is the people who are around you. And we have to get along. We have to, I mean, there might be competition in between high school swim teams, but in the end, you're all going to go to the same after party. So
the only thing I know about Anchorage is probably the song from Michelle Shocked. That's about what I know from Anchorage. So yeah, I'm already learning other stuff. Okay, Susanne, did you have the same answer, or do you, and if you want to add, or is it something completely different?
Well, so first, yes, I had the Alaska thing, and then as backup, I had the Japan thing. But now, as the backup to the backup, what comes to mind that fits in really nicely with what Sylvia's just talked about is this, the fact that actually both Sylvia and I, we were horse crazy, like a lot of little girls are. And when people asked us what we wanted to be when we grew up, we said horse trainers. Yeah, not a reality. But the thing that we did, which I think is still pretty unique and links really nicely to our life as adults, is that we started our own little horse club. We created this little gathering, and we invited our friends, and we would meet. Our parents had a horse trailer that they kept on the side of the house that they used when we moved around a lot, as my dad was surveying in the lower 48s, as we say, in the rest of the US. And they would use it as their moving van. And then when we settled in Alaska, it became sort of this, almost like our little clubhouse, a little play area. And I feel like that was our origin story to creating community, because we didn't have, there were no horse clubs anywhere. There was Girl Scouts. There were, there were sports clubs, but there wasn't anything that connected to our passion. And so that's what Sylvia and I do, is we look for community, and if we can't find it, we create it.
Yeah.
That's really nice. That's really nice.
So true.
Thank you for sharing that. So this is interesting, especially because, well, as twins, you grew up at around the same time. You grew up probably a lot with each other, and so how a lot of these things interact with each other are similar, and at the same time you think about something else that is very interesting to learn about, some more depth of both of you, I would say. And I think, Susanne, you kind of already started talking a little bit about that next question, that if you had not been doing what you've been doing now, what would have become of you? So horse riding was there at some part, but was there something else that you were destined to become at some point?
We grew up next to a wildlife artist. She's an oil painter. And I so wanted to become an artist. I wanted to become a professional wildlife artist. And in exchange for babysitting her son, she taught Sylvia and I lots of techniques. And of course, we had very practical parents, an engineer and a professor of hotel management. So artists, you can't survive, they were very realistic. And so we both got to play around with art a lot. We got to take art classes, and we went to acting classes, and got to do that in a fun way, but it wasn't anything we were encouraged to do professionally. And of course, what I have discovered is that I do it on my own anyway. I paint, I do calligraphy, and I bring it into whatever I'm working on, right? If you're a creative person, you bring it into how you do flip charts. You bring it into how you imagine the space. You bring it into the frame that you set up when you do team building. So even though I didn't become a fine artist or a painter, I think I became an artist in another way, and that worked out fine.
That's really nice, because indeed, a little bit like what you said. You said, okay, our parents were like, okay, that's not practical. You can't make money, and in a way, you're doing both. You make money, but still by using it in a way and proving your parents wrong, and at the same time right, because it's like you're not working or working or making art or selling art or stuff like that, but you're making some other stuff where you're using your art to make your services better in a way, that I'm hearing. That's a really nice story. Sylvia, what's your take on this?
So I wish I could say, I'm like, it's the same. It's not. I really struggled with that question, because I feel like when I look back at my career portfolio, it's not been a ladder, it's not been a path. It's maybe in the bigger scheme of things, it all makes sense when I look back. But I wanted to go to art school, and yeah, parents said, nope, you have to get a 4-year college degree. Again, practical, and also looking towards the future. Your future self will thank you. Yeah, da, da, da. And I ended up getting
Did the future adult thank you for that?
well, yes, and not for the reasons that my parents would have thought. I think I'm really glad that I got the 4-year degree, so that I essentially could prove to myself that I have the grit and the resilience to make it through 4 years of university, studying and having a job and going for a year abroad to Italy, and doing it in 4 years. And then eventually, I mean, the even better part was I took out a loan, like most Americans have to do, to go to university because it's so expensive. And I finally paid it off in my 40s. Yeah, that was a big deal. So I feel like I learned a lot, and the learning kept on giving. But to say, like, what would I have done had I not got into tech? I'm not sure, because I think I was always interested in pioneering the new thing. So when I was never really in PR, which is what I got my undergraduate degree in, because I never really liked massaging the truth, which is what I called PR, as opposed to telling the truth. And I eventually found my way to marketing, and then HR, and to agility. But in there were possible paths in doing art production. So I had a job early on as a production assistant when there was a small company, and it was producing CD-ROMs for Microsoft's, one of their learning and development arms. And they were making really cool stuff, and I got an opportunity to join them at a small studio of 5 guys and me. And I had just gotten my multimedia certification, where I was using Director. I had learned some HTML, the very beginnings of it, some computer programming. And I'm like, art and the new future stuff? Okay, I like this. Unfortunately, they had a really poor business model. And when Microsoft said, yeah, we're not going to need you guys anymore, their one big client dried up. And that meant last hired, first fired. And that was the first time I kind of was let go from a job. And I wasn't sure where to go. There weren't a lot of places that were there weren't a lot of opportunities for people who were doing production art, and producing. And I got an opportunity later on, when I eventually did work at Microsoft as a producer for the games group, and I actually really loved that because I got to work with artists, like graphic designers, sound engineers, the back end, because it was a game that we created ourselves, and so we had proprietary. It's called Outsmart. Where celebrities, you tried to beat them at their own fame, and it was an audio game. And if that was the only thing that I got to do for my job, I think I would have been really happy. But it was not even a third of my job. So it didn't get first priority. It got like third priority. And then eventually they stopped making it because it was very high intense work. So I think if there were more opportunities in that job to really bring creative people together to solve problems, I think I might still have been a producer, but I also really hate politics. And so that was sort of
That
maybe not.
that was your first thing that you joined in, and that's already even if it's a short part or a first part of your life, that was already a very interesting story and how you moved on. And what I really like about it is that sometimes, well, I have just talked in the pre-talk, I have a son of 21 at university, and I still remember when he joined university, when he needed to select, he said, this is my most important choice in life. It will have so much impact on the rest of life. And one way it's like, yeah, that's true, but no, there will still be other things that will have an impact. And of course, a 20-year-old doesn't understand that. But I've worked with people at 30 or 40 that sometimes still have trouble to say, oh, you can still choose what you want to do. You can change. And I think, Sylvia, you're a nice example of person that has done multiple kind of things, moved countries at some point, and both of you, I would say. So there is a lot there that people see. Hey, and from what I understand from both of you, there was no clear path of this is where I want to go, and that's then defined for the rest of your life. And yeah, as far as I've seen, many people on the podcast have a very similar kind of life. There's a couple that have very clear direction, but yeah, like coach or whatever 20, 30 years ago, that was just the start. I still remember a boss making fun of me. Oh, how are you going to make a coach? That there's no living in that, he thought. Well, he's no longer doing his job, but I'm still doing mine. So in that sense, it's a little bit has changed. I want to move to that next question. What is your biggest challenge, and why is that a good thing for you? Who wants to start?
So maybe I'll go first this time. So I think probably my biggest challenge is that I get really bored easily. I do have the shiny object syndrome, where I see a new tool or I see a new way of doing things, or I read a new book and I'm like, oh, that idea is fascinating. And I want to learn all about it. And I want to understand it. And then I think I understand it and I get it. And then I get bored. And I think it's a big challenge for me. And I'm actually starting to get much better as I've gotten older to let things marinate and just simmer and go, okay, maybe I've only reached a certain level of understanding. And if I go deeper, or if I share it with someone and I do more sharing, then they have interesting questions. And that helps me either have a different perspective or go in a different direction with something. I think, for example, psychological safety, right? I read about that in the Teaming by Amy C. Edmondson, her first book in 2011 or 2012. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is the answer. This is the thing that we've been missing in so many corporate settings. And people had not really been introduced to the concept yet. And so a lot of the talks that I gave or where I was bringing it to my work, they were absolutely interested, but there wasn't a lot of support because it was still this kind of a fluffy thing. There's no data or hard science behind it other than what Amy had done in her book. Until Google came up with their study and did their project. And then it was everywhere. And now that more and more people are talking about it, right? I kind of let it go, not totally, but it's like, okay, maybe if I had just stuck with it, like I would be also one of those who were known to be the, I don't want to say grandmother, the auntie of psychological safety. But I moved on and found some other things. And so I think that's the challenge for me, and how I'm trying to overcome it is just remember that I can let things marinate and simmer. And I think it teaches me that there's a right time for everything, and it's okay to be a pioneer, but that I also have to have thicker skin and be more patient. Takes people longer to catch up sometimes to me.
Yeah, I think we also need sometimes people who are front runners in some of that stuff, and then yeah, I know that I once heard I'm trying to think who was it. Yeah, I can't come up with the name, but someone who talked about Jutta Eckstein, who's also living in Germany, and said that if Jutta is interested in something, I need to pay attention because that will be the next thing in a couple of years, and that's also good to be known by. And she might have moved on by the time the rest of the world is interested in. But if you're interested in being maybe not for front runner, but a little bit after, it's interesting to get to follow what Jutta or what you are doing in that way, that it can be okay, and that's also a role to play. And that's that might, I don't know if that would work for you, but that's what I've seen also for some other people.
I don't think I can help it, because I did the same thing with liberating structures, bringing it here and then just going, okay, what's the next thing? I don't want to be known for a tool. It's cool, but
yeah, that might be, well, I also like to have many things in my toolbox, but indeed after 20 years we sometimes forget what is there in the toolbox. And then I was at a large company last year where it was like, okay, what can internal people can bring as a kind of, what can we talk about? And then I saw somebody bringing a topic that I thought, oh, I actually know a lot about that. I could have brought that. And then in some cases, I knew way more about it than the person presenting. And I knew sometimes even things that I was like, this person is just wrong. But okay, I didn't bring the topic. So that is very, I don't want to bash on a colleague. But yeah, it made me realize, oh, when I get questions like that customers, I should grab deeper in my toolbox and look a little bit at what else is there. Because like you say, we sometimes moved on. And psychological safety is a very nice example. This is something that will always be important, always be interesting. But like what you say, we might not have always the energy to think, oh, I want to talk about that. But there will be still customers who are interested in that kind of tools, and to have it from someone who's done it already a couple of years ago. Susanne, do you have a similar kind of story?
Yeah, I was thinking about that, and Sylvia already mentioned sort of my attraction to Japan and to Asia, and I always laugh and say I'm the middle child. So that tells you the birth order there. We have an older sister. And
well, if you didn't tell that you had an older sister, I still didn't know who was older and who was younger.
Yeah, yes. And so I felt often I was in this role of peacemaker, and obviously that was important to me, which is maybe what attracted me to Japan. So this idea of harmony. And so that's one thread. And I would say it's a challenge because when you're too harmonious, you become a doormat. You also are not visible. You are good at supporting other people, but not claiming credit, or that wasn't important to me. And I had to learn that it's okay to be harmonious and at the same time hold certain boundaries. So like be really consistent in what I stand for and what is important to me. And if there are those who see it differently, to also not acquiesce, so not back down, but also, agree to disagree. And I would say I've learned over the years that this desire to keep harmony, I see it come up a lot in the companies that I end up working with, especially in new work environments. There's a lot about shared decision making and shared accountability and shared responsibility. And sometimes it goes too far in that people are so busy keeping the harmony that they then can't make decisions, and that they make really slow decisions. So then in the end, that's not very effective. And I have to say, in my last role, that was what I ended up, I would say, mentoring and coaching as my role as an agile coach, a lot of people on. How do you engage in critical conversations that are productive and psychologically safe, and also there is the potential of somebody being dissatisfied with the conversation or with the outcome? You could say, yeah, you get your feelings hurt, but I would say that's a personal responsibility. That is not a shared responsibility.
I really like that, and indeed, well, you bring the harmony part in Japan. The interesting part. One of the persons I interviewed here taught me about a game for teaching psychological safety, to bring back both of your stories. That I actually did a month or two ago in München at a conference. At OP some months ago. So yeah, to bring everything together. So yeah, that I can definitely share some of that, because I assume that both of you might be interesting about that. But I really see what you're saying about being a peacemaker, and that sometimes too much harmony doesn't help. At some point, yeah, people think we need to have consensus. No, that's not needed. We just need to know, okay, what is blocking us from a certain thing to move forward. And sometimes it's just enough that we can say, okay. And I think Sylvia, we both did a core protocols bootcamp together, where there is a decider in that, where you don't have everybody to agree on everything. We just need to say, okay, what's blocking you from it, and do you have a better idea, and things like that. And that's usually a lot better than just consensus, where everybody says, I 100% agree. No, if I'm not opposed, that might be good enough.
Yeah.
I want to move to that next question, because with two, it of course takes a little bit longer for some of these questions. And I'm really interested in this one, because I've known both of you, Sylvia, a little bit longer, but I've also seen both of you at AILS. And I do think when you're doing a workshop together, that there's a lot of passion, there's a lot of drive. Is there something where you know where that's coming from? And is that the same with both of you? Because that's really interesting.
I think it is. What I have sense is that, and and okay, I won't speak for Sylvia, I'll let her confirm it, that I love to see people, I love it when they light up because they have understood something that is connected to who they are and what they're good at, and they can figure out, like, they see how that connects to the real world, how that gives them agency, and that helps them move through life and work in a more fulfilling way. And I love the energy that comes from seeing people go, oh, I get it. And I can do that, right? It's not just this, it's not a mental thing. It's not cognitive. It's this, it's connected to who they are. And that just totally lights me up and makes me want to keep doing whatever it is that I'm doing.
Sylvia, do you confirm, or is it completely different for you?
So I want to say, we're probably going to have different answers for this. And I looked down at my notes and I'm like, damn it. I have here written that light bulb moment. It absolutely is. And when I think of any time I've done any kind of teamwork, coaching, consulting, training, it absolutely is when I see the light in someone's eyes. Susanne I can just say what she said, of when they recognize they have their own answer. They have their own answer, and it's a good one that resonates for them. It's authentic to who they are, and they get it, whatever it is that they were either trying to learn, trying to understand, and they embody it. For me, it's working together. Like I think that's one of the reasons I loved the core protocols, is that it was a tool that really was about embodying new ways of thinking and really coming from a core individual place. Not that somebody's telling you what to say or do or think, but you having to go through the struggle, the work, to go deep, to play, to paint, to, discover. And then, gosh, when the light goes on, you're like, whoa, I have so much more power than I thought I did. I can do what I want because I can, or whatever.
Is that something, because both of your stories are very similar, is that something you've learned growing up by, I don't know, the way your parents raised you? Could you link it to something in your youth, or?
Oh, for sure. I mean, Sylvia talked about it earlier in Alaska. It's this inner resilience, and trusting yourself. But it also comes, I mean, our parents were major travelers. They got married late in life. We grew up on their stories of getting lost in Finland and having a bicycle accident in Saudi Arabia and going to the Antarctic. And, this fueled us to be learners, lifelong learners. And we heard stories about how their lives were better because of these adventures, because of their ability to connect with other people and to problem solve, and to understand, the solutions are all over the place.
And you also are, once you're learning to trust yourself, then you're also opening yourself up to include others in that trust. Again, because this is what you do when you travel. You have to open yourself up to getting lost, to looking foolish, to sounding dumb, like I don't speak the language, or I'm not saying it quite right. And yet it's really about connecting with people. So the connection, the finding that you don't take yourself too seriously, I think comes from that place of, for me also, seeing our parents be very authentic to who they were, and them modeling that to us was in taking us places. Our mom was Austrian, and every 2 years from when we were 3, I think, we went the whole summer to Europe, and we really got that advantage of seeing how other cultures live. Denmark and Austria and Italy and Germany, and like there were all these different places, and they were people, and they were doing the things, and nobody's wrong or right, but they're living their lives, and it's that difference was good. And we found what resonated with us, which I think, I mean, to make a long story short, which is why we both ended up in Europe instead of the United States, is that we found our core values aligned much more to what's more European than American.
But you both took a different path to get here, because I still remember. So that when I met you in Seattle, yeah, your sister was already living in Germany, I think, and you were still in Seattle, or at least that's what I thought. And it looked like you were still very connected. I remember that you talked about that, but still it was completely different. And then you still ended up in the same country.
Yeah, that was surprising. I didn't think that was going to happen. I thought I didn't want to go back to Italy because I'd lived there 3 times. And I didn't want to go back to the UK because I'd lived there once, and that was enough. Too much like Seattle in that it was rainy and gray and cold. And Berlin was just by chance. But that was also because I had the opportunity to go visit Susanne, and she stayed in Munich. So,
well, you're a lot closer. It's still it's more than a bicycle drive away, I would say, but still you're rather close to each other compared to living in Seattle and living in Munich,
yeah.
of course. I want to move to the next question, about and so what is your biggest achievement so far? And before I jump to that, the question that is below that I'm always interested is that, is it easy for both of you to brag? Because basically what's your biggest achievement is a way to brag and to say, okay, I'm proud of that. Is that easy for you?
No.
No. No.
No.
Damn it.
It's even hard to write my LinkedIn profile. I'm like, oh, I have to write down all of things. I think I maybe got better training than Susanne because I had to do Microsoft performance reviews. And that was where I had to learn how to toot my own horn because nobody else did it for you. And
there was no ChatGPT that could help you with it.
No, exactly. And it was bell curve. I was there during the day where,
Wow.
You could be a star performer, but if you didn't write your goals well enough or clear enough, and your manager was looking, or they didn't negotiate well enough, you were not lucky. So, but I'll go first while Suzanne's still thinking about it. It looks like, and really say that I think my biggest achievement isn't something that fits or that shows up really easily on my LinkedIn profile. It's not the accomplishment of a bullet point at some place I worked. For me, it really is the fact that I decided when I was 40 that I didn't want to live in Seattle anymore. I didn't really want to live in America. And I wasn't sure how that was going to change or how I was going to change it. But at 45, after finding Berlin and deciding on Berlin, that I changed my entire life and moved from the community that I made 14 years in Seattle to Berlin and restarted my life. And not at an easy age, and not because of a job or because of a man or because I have family here, which those are always the questions that I get asked. Oh, so did your husband move? And I'm like, no. No guy. Oh, for a job.
Yeah.
No. Okay. I'm like, yeah, because I love Berlin. I found a place that felt like home and that I was welcomed and that really felt like me. And that I think is my biggest accomplishment in deciding that I had a dream and it was going to be my life and that I was going to make it happen. And the universe conspired every step of the way. And a year later, I was here and have not looked back and have not regretted a single day.
And it reminds me of, well, we talked about the core protocols when Jim McCarthy talks about his ask for wood story. And it's something similar. You ask at the universe something and you get it in a magical way that you can't predict in a way.
Yeah.
And that sounds like a really amazing achievement.
Yeah, well, I do remember I looked back at a postcard that Susanne had sent me, and it was a postcard from Berlin, and I stuck it up on my refrigerator with a magnet that said "Believe," and I took a picture of it. And I had actually no idea that Berlin was even in my radar.
I planted it.
That's what sisters do.
That's right.
Susanne, do you have a similar kind of story?
Actually, yeah. When I was thinking about it, the first thing that often comes to mind when you're a parent is you think of your kid. And I have an amazing daughter that I dragged with me here. And she hated it when we got here. And she looked at me and she's like, "Mom, these Germans are rude." So she was 9 and it wasn't her choice. And we moved without support. And yet, right, she adapted. And I had also no job here, no family here, but I really wanted to be here. And I still can't believe that I'm in Munich so many years later. This is the longest I've lived any place other than Anchorage. But when
your daughter is still happy about this now?
Yeah, she's now, I think she's more German than she is American. I mean, she's pretty bicultural, but definitely bilingual. And actually, I think 2 years ago, she returned from a visit to see her dad in the US. And she came back and she's like, "Thank you, Mom. Thank you for moving us to Germany." Wow. And this is super important to hear because it was really, really hard for a couple of years. And I did wonder if I did the right thing.
So did I understand that you moved all alone without your partner at that moment? So
yep.
Wow.
So similar story to Sylvia, right? Except I did it with a kid.
It's a level harder. In a way, but yeah, it's
different.
So.
That's what Sylvia and I do. We do similar but different. And interestingly enough, right, that wasn't actually the thing that I was thinking was my greatest achievement or my biggest achievement. The first thing that came to mind was actually the fact that I lived in 3 different countries without Google.
Wow.
pre-Google Maps, pre-cell phones, all of that stuff. I did it without I never had an employer that was moving me. I just had the urge and the calling to go to Japan. And then when I got back, I had the calling to go back to Taiwan. And then the same thing happened to Germany. And I realized, yeah, I did that without a company, without a job, without a spouse, and without Google. I mean, seriously.
Yeah, my children can't imagine, like the phone is helping with everything. It's like, yeah, just the idea that I remember when we moved we lived a year with 2 children in Bordeaux in France. And when we moved there, we literally bought a GPS like for the first time at the moment that we moved. And I still remember that afterwards, like, how the hell did we not buy it like 2-3 years before? Because it was already available. But just the idea that you had to do everything with maps and yeah, it's like, this is how we grew up. I still remember the first holiday I took with my partner when we drove to the south of France. We printed off, and there was already internet, so we printed off the full map on how to go from Ghent to to the south of France, and then we come to Paris and we wanted to go right, and there was a large traffic jam and we needed to go left to Paris. And like, okay, the map is useless now for the next whatever 100 kilometers until we go back to the same highway to the south of France after we crossed to Paris. And like, how do we find our way? So we literally drove until the first the station where we could take gas or something like that, but we didn't take it. We just looked at the maps and we tried to say how do we go there, because it's insane. We can't even imagine living like that anymore. I mean, our phones are helping us in all kind of ways. Google, if you don't know, you just Google something. Okay, we might sometimes believe too much in that. That might be another thing. But before of that, we literally had to figure it out, finding a way. It's incredible.
Yep. That went.
But I think a little bit like what you said, the stories of your parents that helped you, because I imagine that when they had, for them in their earlier part of life, that was even harder. There might not even been computers where you could look up or something or whatever. So that's even a completely different thing. Just knowing that there are other countries might be different for some people. There are still Americans that think that Brussels is a country, or that or that kind of things. I want to move to that next question. Do you have a personal agility tip to share? Who wants to go first?
Well, Sylvia, you're the agile pioneer in our family, so I think you go first.
Well, you might be surprised. So I think my personal agility tip is meditation. And I say that because I think, right, just the agile mindset of, people over process is the one that I always say first. I mean, it's the top one, but it's really all about the mindset. And in order to get into a mindset where you're maybe giving up some control, or you're trying to learn to think differently, you have to calm your mind. You have to give yourself a way to shift how you're thinking. And if you can't ever quiet your thoughts or focus on something long enough to quiet your thinking, then I think it's a lot harder to get to thinking differently. So for me, meditation, especially in times of stress or constant change, or where I'm trying to really shift how I do things, if I can meditate and just be reflective, just really consider what's happening, why is that important to me, what's going on. Sometimes it's just about letting the thoughts go, really letting them go. I see that thought, I'm having that thought, it's anxiety inducing, or it's frustrating, or it's joyful, or whatever it is. I'm like, oh, okay, then let it go. Let it go, let it go, let it go. And that for me is, I think, made a big difference in how I can show up more neutral and more open and more curious for any of my clients that are potentially struggling with doing things in a new way, or looking at doing things, shifting how they're doing things, working through change, any kind of change, personal change, team change, right? It's usually an emotional thing, and they start to think about the future, and they are worried about, what it would look like in their status, or just the uncertainty of things. And yet, again, if we can step back and be calm and curious, we have, I think, a better chance of being welcoming in the thing that we think is going to be difficult, or potentially seeing the positive thing in it.
And how did you discover that? Is that something how did you discover that?
Yeah. So I think in Seattle, like really early days, super stressful work at Microsoft. It's very intense. And I discovered a Kundalini yoga class that I just went to on Sundays. But at the very end of class, she always had us do not just the Shavasana, where you're laying there for 15 minutes, but we would actually meditate. And it would be, I think, no more than 10 minutes. And it was like, oh, okay, I'm just watching my thoughts. I'm just being here. I'm just focusing on my breath. And there was no pressure to do it right or to get it right. It was just about being present. And I think.
And was that easy for you? Because like you say there is no pressure to do it right. I've noticed that with many people, when they think or talk about meditation, they always feel, especially when the beginning, it's like, yeah, but it's not working. I can't do that.
Yeah.
Is there something you recognize there?
I think for me, it was fairly easy. Again, I think because it was new and I was like, oh, I have beginner's mind. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just going to try, which is, I think, how I approach a lot of things. And I had a really great women's business community when I decided to leave Microsoft. And there was a shaman, there was a coach, there was yoga instructor. So I found myself in a community of people who practiced, in a way, all kinds of different forms of meditation. And walking meditation, journaling as meditation, breath work, which at that point I didn't really get. I was just like, okay, that sounds like a little guru-y to me. But again, tried not to judge it. Painting as meditation, right? I got that there's lots of different forms. I could see how people playing musical instruments, something that I actually have almost no skill in, they are in a trance, absolutely meditative and very peaceful and calm and relaxed. And I think I actually got back into it when I moved to Berlin, because again, the universe sort of conspired. And one of my first close friends here was a Kundalini yoga instructor and a CEO, interim CEO for different companies. And she held these two roles simultaneously. And I was like, wow. And she's like, yeah, come to my house. We'll do some Kundalini. And I'm like, cool. So I got back into it then and realized this will be a key for me to be able to show up in all of this new stress, the stressors of being a foreigner, of not really knowing the language, of not having a full-time job, of being freelance, meeting people, all the new bureaucracy, the new ways of doing things in Germany. There's just so much new. And I needed to just be in the neutral space where everything is fine. Right now in this moment, everything is fine.
Yeah, I can definitely see that when you're having more stress, that you would need some ways to deal with that, and that can be, if you already know it, that it can help you or reconnect with you. Okay, might be something to do that. Susanne, what's your idea of a personal agility tip?
It's really similar to Sylvia's, of course. So when I was thinking about the answer, I realized, well, that's it. It's that moment of reflection. So the thing that really spoke to me about, in the agile mindset was iterations. Just give it a first try, do a first version. Right? We're often in our own way. We block ourselves thinking, okay, I got to have the perfect plan. I got to know exactly how to do everything. I have to have everything set before I begin, when in fact, you just need to begin. And the key piece that a lot of people miss in this iterative process is if you just do the first version, you do the first experiment, take the first step, and then you reflect. It's that reflection part that's really key. So once you reflect, you're going to see maybe what is the next step, or what you could have done differently, and you want to try the next time. And I feel like it's more, people just keep, they think they're iterating, but they're not doing it in a way that is yeah, I don't want to say effective, but they're doing it in a way that's maybe painful because they keep failing. They're not actually learning. They just keep repeating something. And
yeah, I recognize that. I've seen people that say, yeah, I've done 20 years a job or something like that. Or I've worked for multiple companies. Like, yeah, maybe you did 20 times the same year as a starting, and you didn't reflect, you didn't do anything. And that is different than if you do 20, yeah, if you keep thinking and reflecting. The reflecting part is such an important thing, and if I can definitely see how you can do it at team level, at company level, and also at personal level. I think that's these are very, and you explain it in a different way, but I think there is indeed a lot of similarities about that. One part is what Sylvia says. Okay, just I would say also meditating could help you to look internally, calming down, but reflection might be maybe more at an outside world of what are the results, but still reflection could be very meditative as well. So
yeah, and I thought of it because that was something that surprised my colleagues at my last position. As I said, I do like the three W's from Liberating Structures every week. I look at what happened this week. Why is that important? And what do I want to do with that? And I did it every week so that I could notice patterns about what did I keep choosing, what was important, and what was the outcome of those things, and was I working on the right thing? And in the end, I think I got pretty much every single department in the company to do retrospectives, even finance.
wow.
Yeah, because I could see, right, just reflecting on what they're doing brought a lot more ease in their relationships and what they were choosing to work on. It decreased blame in some cases. Yeah, and it wasn't just doing things for the sake of doing things. They're actually, when they stopped to think about it, they actually made different decisions.
So that's indeed. And when you talk about the three W's, it's what, so what, and now what. That's how I know them, right?
Yep.
So that's but which is really indeed a very retrospective way of doing in a very small way. Well, you can do it in a larger way, but you can do it indeed like I've seen the typical version is about an hour, I think, but I've seen it done in just 5 to 10 minutes. And just looking very, and again, you take the time that you need to take for certain different kind of thing. I've done it also at the end of a daily to ask people just that, look on the small thing, what you want to improve from yesterday, things like that. So that might be really helpful. So thanks for sharing, because that's a very powerful way of working and improving yourself. And I really like the story that you say, okay, we can do that with all kinds of departments. I think many people look for how could we improve stuff at multiple ways, and so that is indeed very nice. That you can do that in all kinds of departments. So that's a nice story to share. I want to move to the next question about remote work. What have you learned? And did you? Well, let's check. You already started about doing a lot of stuff before computers or before Google was there. Did did both of you work remote before COVID? Because all of us, we moved all of a sudden remote, full remote for quite a while. But did you do remote work before?
Yes. I think it's kind of funny because I wrote my master's thesis in 2000, and it was best practices for virtual team development.
Wow.
And I just was fascinated by the topic, but there were very few companies that I could actually talk to. And then there were very few companies that I could actually use it at. So I still felt like it was going to be something really important because of technology, and because, the way Sylvia and I grew up, we grew up separated from most of the people we knew. With most of our family, it was all through letters and telephone calls. And so that was life. This is how you maintain connection, is you have to communicate. So
You write something and then only a week later you get some answer.
if you're lucky.
Exactly. Yeah, but that's one of the things that my children really can't understand, because they're texting and they're even videos, sending small little video chats to each other in the morning. It's a totally different world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my master's in human and organizational development, I chose, and I didn't want to leave Seattle because I was just gotten my job at Microsoft, but I had gotten into this program in Santa Barbara at the Fielding Graduate Institute, and it was fully remote. So I actually did my entire master's program online in an online forum, and we had only 4 in-person touch points. But because of how they created the program and all of the tools and processes and frameworks that they used, we were such a close cohort that we ended up having actually 2 people in our cohort get married at the end of the program. So, yeah,
you were not one of them.
No, I was not one of them. But it was really amazing to see that I had colleagues in Australia, Italy, Malaysia, Canada, the US. They were everywhere, and it wasn't required to come together before we all started. It was invited and it was suggested, so we didn't all come together. But then the next start of the quarter, when we were doing our thesis, it was required. And that's when everyone came together, and it felt like we knew each other because we'd spent so much time online. And there was the golden rule for this.
And online, what kind of tool were you using back in the time?
It was a proprietary thing that Fielding had where it was chat-based.
So you never heard each other's voice?
The first quarter, we were asked, do not pick up the phone. Every question,
Wow.
Everything you have, put it in chat. Everyone has the same questions. Everyone has the same fears. Everyone is going through the same thing. Put it in chat.
You had to put it in chat where everybody could see the questions and everybody could see the answers. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yep. So we really were in it together, and there was no back channel. There was nobody calling up so-and-so and getting the scoop and then someone else being left out. Right. So the only time the first time we were essentially allowed or invited to co-work on something was during the second semester, where we had a key collaborative project that we needed to work on. And that's when the first time we could actually pick up the phone, or if we were physically close enough, we could meet in person. And that was where, I was like, this is not only possible, it actually can be you can build a really strong cohort with the right tools and the right intention, and also meeting in person. I think that's what I learned about remote working, is that the embodied learning, the really deep connection, also happens when you're together, and that strengthens the 2D world when you are separated.
And so, what did you, from all this experience, what would you advise people to do if you want to, yeah, have some way of working remotely? Is there anything that pops to you that you say that this is something I would do, or that I automatically did, for example, when COVID hit, or other?
Share, be online. I think I traveled, so I was actually living in Munich. That was what happened to me during COVID. I got a job down in Munich and I was commuting, and then COVID hit and I moved 100% to Munich. But my community was actually still in Berlin. My community of friends, my liberating structures community, my physical community. And I was going every month by train as soon as the lockdown lifted to see people in person. But we actually started an online group, and we met online every month, and we did like silly hat things. I mean, just some of the things that people have already seen is just being real online is as important as how you show up in person to each other.
Mhm.
But having the time together is also, it doesn't have to be long, it just has to be authentic.
Okay. Definitely, it makes sense. Susanne, was there something you still wanted to add from your story about the tip you wanted to do?
Yeah, something that actually came up, it was not recent, but I would say it was kind of like in the middle of the pandemic. I joined a webinar and the person leading it said, please take a moment and arrive in this shared space by making eye contact with as many people as you can in this remote space. And it was amazing what it did, because first, it wasn't everybody turn your camera on and do this. It was an invitation. And it really actually created connection when people in a remote setting made eye contact with each other on camera, even just for a brief moment. And in a way, it brought everybody into the same space, because we're in different rooms, and our shared space becomes the screen in front of us. And that eye contact, that intentional eye contact with as many people as you could, like brought you into that shared space, that shared virtual space. And then you could go
just
off.
that I understand, if you're in a Zoom call with many people, how do you know that you're both looking at the same time to each other, or did you went in breakout rooms, or how should I see that?
No, so right, it's like everybody's on the screen together, and you are just trying to look at everybody and to make eye contact. And it was just the attempt to do that is what brought
To really arrive into that space. Yeah.
Yes, and it literally takes 30 seconds, less than that, and it has a very powerful impact.
It reminds me of a study I once read, or already discovered multiple times, about the study that they did at the university, where they asked people to look into each other's eyes, I think for 6 or 8 minutes.
8 minutes.
And 8 minutes, and then some people ended up getting married, and students really get into a relationship, because it creates such a boundary. And in December, my partner and I, we did an Advent challenge, and one of the exercises we needed to do was also, I don't think it was 8 minutes, it was just a couple of minutes, but yeah, it's really, even after so many years together, it really brought a lot of connection to try to just look into each other's eyes. And in a way, meditating, because you're not allowed to speak, you're not allowed to say anything, you just try to connect, in the beginning, sometimes you feel a little bit laughing, okay, what should I do? But I really found it a very powerful way to do that. I never thought about doing this online, so thanks for giving that example. I really like that. definitely I'm going to try that, both in a one-on-one setting, but also with multiple people. I think that can be a really powerful way. So thanks for sharing.
Okay.
I want to move to that, and I'll hope also to find the study and link it. I want to move to a book, and I think both of you had already some books that you wanted to talk about. So who wants to start with what book?
Well, I think we have the same one. We have a shared book that we both love, and we talked about it actually a lot at the last Agile in Europe conference. Flux.
And that should be the book.
Yes, that is the book.
Sylvia found
who
that.
wants to start it? So Sylvia, you start with that then.
Okay, so I will just say that I had just gotten laid off for the third time in 3 years, and I really wanted to give myself the gift of learning, because I had not done a lot of professional development for myself because I was just working. And when I saw, I was listening to a podcast, and I'm totally forgetting, I think it was Slow-Mo, Gadot, his podcast called Slow-Mo. And he had this really wonderful woman called April Reen on his show. And they were talking about the rapid and increasing rate of change, and how we actually have a lot of tools at our disposal, but it's really a mindset shift. And she had written a book because she realized that we have these ways of being that could absolutely be our tools if we shifted our mindset to not just survive in this new rapid change that's not slowing down, but thrive in it. And she wrote this book, which she essentially looked at all of these different ways, and she codified it in these 8 superpowers, and she calls it Flux. So the ability to thrive in constant change. And she says it's a noun and a verb. And she writes about these 8 superpowers and how you can cultivate them, what they look like, how you cultivate them, and then how that actually helps you see change as a thing that helps you in your life. It's a strategy for having an empowered, intentional, forward-moving life, as opposed to, it's chaos, I don't know what's happening, there's another change, I'm stressed, it's never ending, da, 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 da. So,
and you already talked before about doing a lot of changes in your life and a lot of other things. So I can imagine that you as a person were more open to change than maybe some other people. How did that? If you would look at that book, and you look at people who have it harder to change, would that be a book that is easy for them to pick up, or would that, because I can imagine that I just think about a couple of people I worked with in the past that really have a hard time with change. Would that be a book to advise for them, or would that be a hard book to read for them?
I think it would be a really interesting book for them to pick up. April tells a lot about her personal story and about how she suffered a lot of personal setbacks early on in her life, but that she didn't realize what was happening or how she was changing until she started looking back and realizing, oh, these are all tools that I've gathered in my toolbox that are actually now helping me and making it easy and making it more manageable. And yet it's not necessarily about making change easier. It's about really shifting the way that we look at change. And the metaphor that we came up with was like the weather. The weather's happening whether we like it or not. But we have more and more tools at our disposal to deal with weather. We have GPS, and weather radar on our phones. Didn't used to be on our phones. We would have to trust the weather people, and the weather people would have to look at their meteorology reports. Before that, we would trust the farmer's almanac and go, okay, well, last year it was really wet, so maybe this year it's going to be dry. Before that, you're right, not much. You look up in the sky, I've got a pain in my elbow, it's going to be a wet one, And we are having more and more tools at our disposal to deal with weather. And there are a lot of other changes in our life that we can look at as weather if we have the right tools to help us shift our thinking about what that looks like. And that's what I think Flux does.
I really like that. Susanne, if you think about the same book when your sister, she brought it to you, or in the way that she discovered it, what attracted you in the story to start reading it?
When I realized, well, this lady's written our story. Because, I mean, we have a different...
And you don't remember her talking to you before? She didn't interview you for writing your story?
No. No. But, right, Sylvia and we don't always have the same things happen in life, but we did. I was laid off 2 months after she was, and we were like, oh, this is an interesting development. What's going on in the world? And we already intuitively sensed that there were more changes coming. And that, in fact, hey, change, isn't that life? I mean, okay, the only thing you can guarantee are death and taxes and change. And as I read the book, I was like, she's writing how we live. These are the tools that we grew up using and that we've cultivated. These are all the capacities and the capabilities that help us be so resilient and use change to our advantage. And we both got really excited about the fact that she codified it. She gave these very clear examples. And I think that's what will make this book so valuable to people who maybe resist change or feel like they're not good with change, because there are lots of examples that remind people, well, maybe you're better at change than you think you are. Maybe saying you're not good at change is an old belief, or it's an old story you've been telling yourself. But in fact, when you get to choose change, you're pretty good at it. And maybe that's the key, is we have to choose change more often, or we have to realize, okay, we have to accept change is just a part of life now. And we have to choose, what clothing we want to put on, which is why the weather metaphor is so great. A lot of it has to do with choosing, and knowing you have more choices then actually makes it easier.
I really like that, but especially when you talked about, okay, some of these things happened during COVID. I think that many people in the agile world and that are used to seeing change in a constant thing, I had the feeling that a lot of us were better prepared for COVID, because we're like, okay, this is reality, and we're not going to fight reality. We're just going to look, okay, what are the ways to deal with it? Where I saw so many other people fighting, it's not true, and blah, blah, like, but this is what the world is now. It's not the world I like. Okay, and just looking at the data, like you said, years, and this is not something that in 1 month we'll get over it. It takes a while, and luckily we were better at some of these things, where it actually, when we had the first vaccines, I was like, this is a year before I was expecting them. I was happy and think like that, is because I looked at the data. I was like, hey, it still wasn't over, and we could discuss if it's over or not, but we live in a way that most of us, we ignore it. But there are still people dying from it and getting seriously ill from it. But it's completely different than 4 years ago, I would say. So there's, but I saw so many people fighting. Is that something you recognize also in your environment, or is that just me thinking that?
So could you frame the question a
Well,
little?
the fact that people who are so much more in the agile space or in similar spaces where you are, that people like you and me and a couple of others were easier to adapt to hard changing environments like I now mentioned COVID, but I think also when you say getting fired, I think there is a lot of firing going on the last couple of months in the world. And I see some people being very resilient. It's not nice, but at the same time, like, okay, it's a little bit like we say, it's an interesting concept. How do we deal with that? Does that, do you recognize that part, or is it just me seeing some of that stuff?
Like Sylvia,
Suzanne?
wants to go.
I feel like I've been jumping in early, so I was going to let you.
I would just say that I think Sylvia and I both recognize in the agile arena, the roles are change agents. And being a change agent means, you have certain skills, you have some tools at your disposal. And if you're drawn to that, it means that you also recognize it as something important, something that people need support with, and you're drawn to doing it. So the only thing I noticed was, even though some of the change was easier because of the tools and practice, there's still change fatigue. So there's still this, like, we only have so much capacity for change. And then after a while, we're like, can't do anymore. I just can't do anymore. No.
That reminds me of something that I've seen also with people, like, for example, when people, I've coached a few women that just became mother, and when you just become a mother and you have a career, you're really looking like, how do I do all of that together? And I saw a lot of them thinking like, oh, I need to change jobs because the current job is not working. But at the same time, I was like, but then you add another change in your life that is not making your life any easier. Maybe in the first year, let's keep that part of your life stable, because the other part is so much into a lot of change. And is that that when you say about, when there's so much change, I think also when there is change in your personal life, when there's change in your work life, you can't have multiple things going on at the same time. That feels very hard.
I think it depends, right? I think it depends on, and this is where Susanne might be wanting me to talk about the new thing that I've discovered, because I feel like those people who are in Agile and who are attracted to it are those people who already have somewhat the character of, being maybe not necessarily extroverted, but curious enough to go out and discover and find new ways of doing things, or wanting to bring people together, or they also have increased their own ability, because the mindset, right? The agile mindset, people who are attracted and think like that already are increasing their ability to be resilient, because it's the thing that they're working towards. They're already building that skill because of all the things that they're trying to do in the work of bringing people together, of collaboration, of experimentation, of people side of teams, right? Not just the structure or the process, but they're increasing their ability to learn and unlearn. I think the interesting thing is the environment, right? It's whether or not you had or have a supportive environment, because you can be super resilient and you can have the right character elements. But if you are in an environment that does not support you, then trying to make change can become impossible. Right? I think we see that all the time, and probably companies that are now saying we're not going to do remote anymore. That's a huge change for people who shifted their lives to say, wow, this is really going to give me more flexibility to be here for my family, to not have to commute, to take the stress away from doing this and to being more focused and productive. Where now something outside of their control is changing their environment. So
yeah, that part I definitely recognize. Well, I wanted to go a little bit back to what you said earlier about the system. It reminds me of a quote that I've learned that I heard. I didn't learn it from that person, from Deming, that says a bad system will always beat a good person every time, or something like that. Like, yeah, it's and yeah, we talk so much about, yeah, it's people over processes, but bad processes can definitely create, can create a lot of damage in a lot of that stuff. So
yeah, the ecosystem can squash any good thing that you're trying to create if it's not in support.
mhm.
The environment.
And that's the interesting part about being an agile coach, because, well, for me, one of the things, well, I'm now working as an engineering manager, but before, as an agile coach, I'm trying to work in an organization and trying to change stuff, and there might be people not ready. The system wants to go for stability all the time, and even now as an engineering manager, there are things that I want to change, and that is not well, that's always hard, because people are used to working in a certain way, and that is indeed, even if you have the support, if you have different people around you that want to go, there is still a lot of people who don't understand the new way of working for whatever reason. It's not even important if they want to do it or not. It's hard for a lot of people to change, and then we come back to the flux, what you talked about before, about, okay, how easy is that? I know that both of you, or there were already some other books, but I also am conscious about the time, because we're looking at a lot of time. Do you still want to bring up one of the other books, or we continue with the next question?
I think I'm happy to go to the next question. That's fine.
Okay, well, the question that I'm really interested to hear, and especially with both of you in all the settings that we already talked about, is, what is the question that you think I should also ask, and what's the answer? And we could even do it, if it's a question you want to ask your sister, that could also be the play around with that.
No, I have my question, because I feel like it's a question that's a little bit controversial and has come up a couple times. And it could be a whole podcast in and of itself.
That we can do that another time, but let's have the short version for today.
Short version, and then my answer, which I will share afterwards, is Agile dead?
I knew it! That's what I was going to ask.
Twin moment.
Yes.
Yes. And my answer is, no, Agile's not dead, but the exclusive consumer mindset around, we must do Agile, like we must do anything, and only in this way, that's dead. And the fact that Agile, quote unquote, doesn't work. I mean, I've been hearing that for years. I was like, Agile still works, because the actual thing about Agile is that it's about adaptability. It's about flexibility. It's about iteration and collaboration. Again, it's a mindset. And there is a certain tool or a methodology or whatever that doesn't work for an industry or for a group of people or a team. That doesn't mean Agile doesn't work or that Agile's dead. It means maybe, and from what I'm seeing, I think Agile coaches are losing their jobs. I think companies are looking at these roles and saying, no, we don't need them anymore. And is that because there are more of those skills that only Agile coaches had in companies, bringing people together, helping them think more openly, creating events that got them into brainstorming and iterative collaborative working? There are more people who have those responsibilities in their roles now, and they're actually good at them. More engineering managers, for example, are taking on more of those roles. And maybe it's not just about Scrum, it's also Kanban. Well, okay, so there's using Asana, there's using Jira, there's using Trello. We've got these actual tools. And as more and more people learn them, there's less of a, this is Agile and this is the only way to do it. And this is how we work, which is what we want. I mean, this is honestly, in the very beginning, when I started doing and working with agility, I was brought into a company, Solutions IQ, that's now Accenture, and they were bringing me in because they had the process, but what they missed was team dynamics, leadership development, change management, psychological safety, all of these human elements, and the process and tools for working with humans, not just software. And I think Agile's not dead. It's just different.
I want to go to Susanne's answer immediately, but I want to first say a little bit about this because it's the interesting thing. So this podcast started as a book version in more than 10 years ago, and that question was already in there. And then most answers were going in all kind of directions. These days, it's a lot about, indeed, is Agile dead? Is Agile still alive? What's the future of Agile? There is a lot of, many people are thinking about it, and the answers go, in many cases, very similar to what you say, sometimes totally different. But I think in general, it's indeed like, yeah, but we're the just selling the solutions. It turns out Agile, and for some people that means Agile is dead because it just sounds like selling a certain solution. Chris Matt says that there is a community of needs and a community of solutions. And he says, yeah, the community of needs still is there and we need that. But the selling solution, yeah, a lot of less people are interested in that because that's a one pony trick that is easy to sell on sometimes companies that just want a quick answer, but that's not what they need. That's a little bit the thing where I see a lot of that. But anyway, I added something on top of that. Susanne, what is your question?
Well, that was exactly my question. I was like, it's intriguing because the only thing I could add to what Sylvia brilliantly talked about was the fact that if you see agility as a process or as a thing, it's evolved, right? Humans, as Sylvia described it, humans, we're evolving, we're learning. So if you only see it as a product, kind of like you just mentioned, that's too rigid. And so when something's really rigid, it's it breaks. It doesn't work in every environment. And that's what people are discovering. If they come in thinking Agile is a solution and then you just plug it in, oh, surprise, it doesn't work. But if you go in as a mindset and you see it as behavior change and skill sets and ways of doing things based on the system and it's in and the environment that it's in, then yeah, it's more alive and it's evolving. So yeah, I would say I'm not even sure you saying or asking the question, is Agile dead, is even helpful, except to get people to realize it's not a thing, right? It's not a product. It's mindset, and mindsets evolve with the humans that are, that are using their minds.
Mm-hmm. And I really like yeah, to go back to what Sylvia said about more and more people are doing in an agile way. I think if you look at the larger the Googles, Twitter, so a lot of things, they're using a lot of agile ideas without calling it agile. There was and I think, yeah, if you look back at many of the larger corporations that, especially in IT, that are doing some of that have been there, they will never call it that way. But if you look back at some of their processes, about the way of thinking, the mindset, there is a lot there that is recognizable. And I think, similar to what you said, Suzanne, like, and it's spreading to, what you said earlier, it's spreading to many different kind of parts of the company. You do have, indeed, I don't think there is any part of in any kind of company that couldn't use a retrospective from time to time. Yeah?
Yeah.
Many don't do it, and I see a lot of people, even in so-called agile companies, not understanding retrospective. But if you do it, um, just well, I talked about something with the advanced challenge. One of the other things I'm doing actually every week with my partners, just looking back at our week and just looking like, okay, what could we improve? If I call it retrospective, my partner would definitely say, no, let's not use work tools. And we use it also we learned it from a coach that advised us that, and for me, it's like, yeah, we're doing a kind of retrospective where we're looking back, like, what did we do last week? What would we like? What do we want to improve? It's not a very formal one, but it's definitely that kind of thing. And I think many people have a lot of that. So in that sense, it's totally not that. It just morphed into something else, to a bigger part of the world, I would say.
Good.
Okay, I want to move to that next question. Who do you think I should ask next? And I think both of you had a couple of people to think about, or at least one that I think both of you shared, that you wanted to talk about. So I'm not sure, what persons you had in mind.
So I would say another person who I actually met years ago in Seattle at the Liberating Structures Global Gathering, even though she wasn't really, I mean, at that point, not in my social circle, and I didn't know her when I lived in Seattle, because at that point I was living in Berlin. And she's not from Seattle. So it's Heidi Hefland. She's the creator.
And I think that's Heidi.
That's Heidi. And she's created dynamic reteaming. And she came and she was another co-keynote at ALE last year. And she essentially helped everyone experience the 5 different ways of reteaming. And she used liberating structures, which was great. And I just think her experience of all of the work that she's done in the tech arena and working with teams in many different levels and different positions and different types of companies, she's mapped the patterns and she's seen, like, this is inevitable. And if you want to do it well and you want to keep your teams productive and working, you can teach them how to re-team and you can keep your people. So I think she'd be super interesting to talk to, and she's a super great human. So
yeah, I really like the idea of reteaming and doing it in a smart way. I've done some things before I read the book. I've also heard, we talked earlier about the core protocols. I know that Jim and Michelle McCarthy did a complete reorganization at Microsoft, and also in a very smart way. That was a full department, if I remember correctly. Yeah. And that was, for me, one of the first inspirations about, okay, what does mean a stable team, and how could you not have a stable team but still keep some of these things and some of that those things. And yeah, looking then at the work that Heidi did to do so much more deeper into looking at different patterns from different places. So definitely a really interesting book, and I'm looking forward to. She was already on my list, but I was waiting for people to invite her. So I'm really happy that
You're inviting Heidi.
that she's invited. Susanne, who do you want to add?
So I'm embarrassed to say Victor, and he's got a Polish, he's Polish, brilliant guy. But I can't say his last name.
But this is Victor.
Yes, there's Victor. There he is. He's got such an interesting story, and he's doing some really amazing, beautiful stuff right now. He's building something in the health sector, and I think it's pretty innovative. So I think he would be super interesting to have on the podcast. And then another person that came to mind was David Heath. He's in the UK, and he's been doing a lot of work.
David.
That's David.
There he is. Yeah, he's been doing lots of work in the government sector. I mean, talk about a hard place to get to change. And he's been doing some really interesting things there, using a lot of liberating structures, but also just collective empowerment. And I think both of them are doing really interesting things in the world.
Thank you for bringing that. And I do know that, and I will bring that up just because there was another name that I got from I don't remember from you, but Nancy was also in. And just by coincidence, tomorrow morning I will publish her podcast, because I had already. I don't know what's happening with my mouse, but I already talked with her before, so that podcast will go live tomorrow morning, so people can now know a little bit in the order which things are published. But it was a really wonderful conversation that I listened back last night to prepare everything for putting it. So yeah, indeed, very powerful and very interesting thing, that conversation that we had. Also moved in all kind of directions, a little bit like today. And we already been talking for quite a long time. Not surprisingly, with just two people answering a lot of questions. So to close up, if people want to connect to you, what is a good way to connect to you?
LinkedIn, I think. At least for me, that's probably I regularly check LinkedIn. Yeah.
So. And that would be your LinkedIn. And I think for Sylvia, it would be the same, I would guess. And that's your LinkedIn.
Yes. LinkedIn, Sylvia Taylor. The photo's 8 years old, but it's me.
Yeah, that's what we said also in the pre-talk. Yeah, a lot of us, we might have changed a few times our picture on LinkedIn, and then we keep forgetting it. And then I did add it this year because at some point people in my new company were like, we don't recognize you anymore. So okay, so maybe let's change it a little bit, because indeed I think that picture that I had before was like more than 10 years old. So like, okay, it was time to change it. But yeah, before that, it was indeed a long time. Now, I want to thank both of you for your time, because it's been a long time, but it's been a wonderful time to chat back with both of you. I was expecting a lot from it, but I got a lot. It was really, for me, a wonderful time to talk to both of you. So thank you very much.
Thank you for having us. And it's always a pleasure to see how many of our answers are going to be the same, and how they're going to be different. And I think maybe that's also really interesting for people who might know Susanne but don't know me very well, or people who know me but don't know her very well, because we're definitely starting to do more work together. And I think the power of our twinness, our collaboration, our history, our ideas, can be really fun and dynamic. That was fun. Thank you.
Yeah, I really like, well, I really like pairing and having multiple people doing a workshop. And yeah, this is, I can just imagine, well, I've seen the workshops for both of you at the Hill, and it's indeed, it's, yeah, it brings so much that you're connected at a different kind of level than what I've seen with many people. I've done workshop with my father, which I felt very similar kind of connections. But I think with people grew up like as twins, it's even a much deeper connection. And I could feel it really tonight in the way when someone answers that the others, like in your facial expression, you can already see like, hey, wait a minute, that was what I was supposed to answer, or something similar. Even just the smiles at similar times, this is very similar. So yeah, it was wonderful to have both of you. Susanne, you want to have add some last famous words to that?
Just thank you for creating the podcast. Thank you for creating this space and, giving voice to stories out there, and keep it up. Thank you for creating it.
Yeah.
Thank you. It's, yeah, it takes a lot of time, but it is conversations like tonight that really give me the energy to keep doing it. I calculated this week I have like 590 people on my list, but I just know that there's no way that I'm going to talk to 590 people. Well, this is two-nighters too, so that's, I should maybe start to invite much more to people that will go faster. But no, I just know that the order is by default in the way people are invited. So I don't have to choose. I might skim here and there, add a couple of people in, but most of the time it's just the invitation that is coming. And I just know that 590. If you just do 52 a year, that's more than 10 years. I doubt I will do that. But so far, I'm still having energy, and I really love doing it. And that's thanks to guests like you, because that's really where the energy is coming from. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you for watching Who's Agile, where the stories of agilists come to life. I hope you liked today's interview. Subscribe if you're not subscribed and want to get to know other agilists.